Mario Kart is a game all about kart racing. I hope you knew that already. Now, a very interesting feature of this genre is that usually there's a button you press to move forward. This is quite useful for silly things like driving around the track and playing the game. But if you've followed my channel for any length of time, you'll know that's not exactly what I do here. See, Mario's gas pedal is completely busted, which forces me to ask an extremely important question. Is it possible to beat Mario Kart 8 Deluxe without accelerating? Although, to answer that question, we first need to figure out what beat means, because the 8th Luigi Racer doesn't have an obvious primary mode. It's a multiplayer game, and it's meant to be played that way. I could just drive backward in time trials, but someone else already did that. Besides, I don't want to just finish a course, I want to come in first place, as is my legally mandated right against computer players. And in order to understand how best to achieve such an incredible feat, let's take a look at how not accelerating affects gameplay. A lot of it is exactly how you'd expect. No starting boost, no pressing A to drive forward, and no auto-accelerate, obviously, because I'm not a disabled 3-year-old. This comes with some further consequences, such as not being able to drift whatsoever, because doing so requires holding the A button. No drifting means poor handling and missing mini-turbos, essential tools for any skilled Daisy Dash player. So how can I even move? Well, there are two options, reversing and items. Mushroom boosts and bullet bills are always helpful, and by turning around and driving backward, it's possible to make slow but steady progress along a course. Wait, Lakitu, what are you doing? I had this under control. I don't need your help. Well, it turns out that Mr. Cloud Turtle here throws a big ol' wrench into my plans of conquering the Grand Prix, because instead of checking which direction you're going, the game checks which direction you're facing. Although even if my momentum wasn't reset every 5 feet, I probably wouldn't have a shot. Driving backward is, as I mentioned, extremely slow, and with only 5 items that can actually do anything to move me forward, I would require more luck than a 4-leaf clover stapled to a 7-footed rabbit falling down a wishing well to actually keep a decent pace throughout a single lap, much less an entire cup of tracks. With this in mind, I've got to set a goal for myself. Grand Prix might be off limits, but I do appreciate the structure it provides, so I'll be playing the first 4 cups one at a time in Versus mode against the hardest difficulty of computer, Hardcom. Wow, better give a raise to whatever employee came up with that name. But still, how am I going to finish a lap, much less defeat the most powerful AI Nintendo has to offer? It all comes down to a little-known feature the devs graciously decided to drop in Update 2.2, Custom Items. When this is selected, the player is free to choose whatever items they want to appear, and I know just the one. Let's hear it for gold mushrooms, and the fortuitous twist of fate that allowed me to go to Super Nintendo World and ride the Mario Kart ride while I was working on a Mario Kart video. Seriously, that was not planned, but it was way too good an opportunity to pass up. Also, tax-deductible merch. Let's go! And that's enough getting sidetracked for one video. I promise, boosting is totally different from accelerating. It's my only realistic option to actually beat the game without ever pressing the A button, and I promise this is still extremely difficult. For starters, I can only move at a reasonable speed when I have an item in hand, which I can only get by reversing down the track while every single robot gets a massive head start. Plus, I'm not the only one that gets to use the gold mushroom. These top-of-the-line computer players also get constant access to one of the most powerful items in the game. Last but absolutely not least, if I'm ever caught without a golden mushroom in my inventory, I am completely screwed. I'll have to make it all the way to the next set of item boxes while Lakitu constantly sabotages me. And if there's an obstacle like a boost pad in the way, the entire attempt has basically been blue-shelled. On top of all that, the computers have another huge advantage. They can drift and I cannot. Steering my vehicle, as you might imagine, is kind of important, especially when I'm forced to make up such a huge deficit. But even with boosts, I'm not able to drift, locking away a crucial movement technique and creating a constant struggle to collect that coveted gold cup. Now, my cart might not be able to move properly, but your fingers should have no trouble heading toward that dislike button if you want to race away from my channel with the speed of a bullet bill. But if your gas tank is empty and you're trying to fill it up with some more wacky challenge runs, remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment about your favorite section or any new ideas you have. With the stakes raised and my body ready, it's time to investigate the true ramifications of these shenanigans in our very first set of courses, the Mushroom Cup. And where better to start than Mario Kart Stadium, a fantastic introduction to some of the essential strategies that will carry me through this entire challenge, and my go-to practice level when pinning down some of the finer details of the run. Like, what character and vehicle parts do I use? Normally I'd look at the acceleration stat, but here that matters about as much as the plot of a mainline Mario game, leaving handling as the most important thing to consider instead. In order to max it out, I chose the OG Koopaling and my Mario Kart main, Small Bowser Child. Tiny characters generally have slower vehicles but better handling, and after experimenting with a variety of chassis and wheels, I settled on the Varmint bike with wooden wheels. This definitely isn't the only character and kart combo that could work for the challenge, but it did its job well enough to lock in and move on to the biggest part of the run. Practice, practice, practice. Practice. Practice, practice. To have any chance of coming in first when taking on an entire cup, I need to know each course inside and out. Every sharp turn, dangerous obstacle, item location, shortcut, and stupid gimmick that could maybe give me an edge over my competition. First things first, I have to turn around, and that's actually not best accomplished by holding reverse. Instead, quickly tapping the B button helps me to rotate quicker while losing less distance, allowing me to reach the first set of items with only a single Lakitu reset. As long as I have a mushroom in hand, going off-road doesn't matter, so I can cut in front of this pipe to skip the wide turn and make it to the anti-gravity section faster. Unfortunately, this turn is way too tight to just press right and let the wheels carry me. If I try that, I'll crash into the wall like Mario after he's had a few too many magic mushrooms and waste precious seconds getting back on track. Perfect execution is the only way to reach the next set of item boxes before my gold mushroom runs out, which means I require a much faster turn. There are a couple options for this. The simplest way is to just hit a wall at the proper angle. Maintaining speed isn't super important as long as I have an active boost, but this is precise and messing up once can be enough to kill an entire run. No, I need something a bit more reliable, which is where drift hopping comes into play. I might not be able to actually drift, but by holding the direction I want to turn and mashing the right side trigger, I can reorient my vehicle much more quickly. Nowhere near as fast or precise as drifting, but you know what they say. Beggars can't depend on common video game techniques to win their stupid challenges. Something choosers. That is how the saying goes, right? If I can avoid screwing up that turn, I'm free to grab the double item box, cut across the small grass section, and make a tight turn to edge by the drop-off and reach the glider section. This is one of the rare moments where I don't rely on shenanigans in order to actually move forward, but if I'm gliding along without boosting, that means I'm missing out on opportunities for extra speed. All that really matters is that I can start the next lap and get another mushroom before I run out, and the best way to do that is by cutting through the sand between the wall and pipe forest, which has the added bonus of overtaking my virtual rivals. Success in MK Stadium unlocks progression to Water Park, which is an amusement park themed around water. Nintendo, you're killing me with these amazing names! The water doesn't actually matter too much though, because my gameplay and strategies aren't significantly affected. As long as I start each lap with 2 mushrooms, I'll probably be alright, because that's what it takes to reach the next set of items on the anti-grav loop-de-loop and maintain momentum. The next set is much closer and allows a shortcut through the Toda Whirls, but if I don't have enough power after starting the next lap, I'll have to wait for it to run out so I can grab another box and have enough juice to continue. Sweet Sweet Canyon introduces some sticky situations, such as the starting cannon where just waiting for the glider section to end will eat up half of my gold mushroom, forcing me to bring along another. Luckily, the twisted anti-grav cookie section that follows is the perfect length to use up my items and grab the double box at the end, provided of course that this U-turn in the middle doesn't trip me up. Falling here is once again a death sentence for the course, and usually the attempt as a whole. Reversing past this section is absolutely torturous, and if Lakitu grabs me at the wrong time, I'll miss the items at the end and have to make a sacrificial jump just to get one. The shortcut through the donut hole at the end is usually simple, but can still be screwed up enough to land me out of bounds. If I've made it this far with my chance to win intact, great! But Thwomp Ruins is dead set on crushing my hopes and dreams flatter than Paper Mario. From a purely strategic perspective, it's actually rather simple, but the complex execution has all sorts of exciting new ways for me to mess things up, and given that this is the last race in the cup, there's always going to be a lot riding on it. After reversing to the first set of items, I can take the anti-grav section on the cave wall for some guaranteed boosts to reach a double item box, assuming no bot steals it from me first. I then breeze past the pond while hopefully avoiding any thwomps to reach the final, trickiest section with lots of opportunities to fall off. This tempting shortcut is just begging for me to take it, but also very easy to fail. And while a single grab from Lakitu only slows me down for a few seconds, those could make the difference between maintaining momentum or losing my mushroom before the next set of items. With each circuit fully understood, I had nothing left to do but try the real thing. 4 courses, back-to-back, gold medal required. In my early attempts, Water Park and Sweet Sweet Canyon were the heartbreakers. 1st, 7th, 10th, and 2nd, actually. That was a nice surprise. Unlike some later cups, all of the tracks here have the potential to be reliably dominated. I just wasn't yet up to the task, as demonstrated by my next endeavor, when I got 12th on both courses and 1st in Thwomp Ruins? Maybe I was too hard on it. 2 major wins and major losses won't get me what I need, but starting with a double 2nd place was a nice gear shift. And then, hey, 4th in Sweet Sweet Canyon isn't bad. Maybe I can clutch out a win in Thwomp Ruins and beat the Mushroom Cup right here, right now. I played this flawlessly, never bumping a wall or missing an item until I passed Morton for 1st place at the end of lap 2. From there, I widened my lead until I glided across the finish line without a challenger in sight. Unfortunately, my performance in this challenge depends partially on how well the computers race against each other, something I have very little control over. And in this case, my stupid adopted brother, who was held back a year for eating glue and only now survives due to nepotism, got 3rd place, which was just barely enough to edge me out for top spot. Barely. 1 point! Guess I'd better start over. After another string of solid placements in the early courses, I found myself 2 points behind the top spot heading into Thwomp Ruins. 1st place here would guarantee the Gold Cup, and I started off on point, reaching 6th place during lap 1 and 4th by the beginning of the 3rd. But here I made a critical error, accidentally slipping between the item boxes and losing 7 precious seconds as I reversed to correct my mistake. I still might have been able to catch up, but hitting a wall at a bad angle sent me careening over the edge at the end. At this point, 1st place was a long-lost dream, so I resigned myself to a mediocre 4th as I cruised across the finish. Yeah, that's not gonna cut it. After a brief back and forth with Baby Mario, I secured 1st place in Stadium and wrestled it away from my most annoying sibling in the final moments of Water Park. A dazzlingly clean ride through Sweet Sweet Canyon put me in the best position so far, 11 points ahead of 2nd place. At this point, I'd have to try to lose, right? After an NPC collision sent me bouncing off the walls at the beginning of Thwomp Ruins, I missed the double item box and lost 10 seconds. This was bad, but I still had a comfortable score cushion and managed to finish lap 1 in 10th. Everything went smoothly to land me in 5th heading into the final lap, but then something terrible happened. I played too well. I reached the boxes on the last possible frame before my boost ran out, leaving me with only a single mushroom to reach the final set of items. Backing down the tunnel and waiting for the items to activate dropped me from 1st place all the way back to 10th. But it's not over yet, and I took the shortcut to Cut by Rosalina and passed Baby Peach on the final glider section to end in 8th place. I held my breath during the final tally, and this time I was 1 point ahead instead of behind. Yes! Finally, 1 cup down. After all this, you can clearly see the immense impact of a single mistake or moments of bad luck, and going forward, it only gets worse. But let's shoot ourselves back in time with the Shell Cup's retro courses: Moo Moo Meadows, Mario Circuit, Cheep Cheep Beach, and Toad's Turnpike. Guess what? This Mushroom Moonview Highway is the easiest track so far, removing a lot of pressure from the final course. Instead of having sets of items at various points around the track, boxes glide about individually, making it relatively easy to sustain speed as long as I keep fender benders to a minimum. But I gotta tell ya, this first field of cows has a serious problem. It's too easy. Counterintuitive, I know. Let me explain. The long stretch before any items requires 3 Lakitu resets and puts me over half a lap behind 1st place, which is obviously hard. Actually driving around the track is simple though, because there are basically no obstacles aside from the occasional bovine or rodent. But this is a double-edged sword, because all my opponents can effortlessly coast through while there are basically no special shortcuts to gain ground. The best I've got are cutting across the pasture near the beginning. Plus, I have to carefully manage my mushrooms across only 2 item sets. I can get a few boosts by tricking off ramps or molehills, but these options are very situational. Mario Circuit is a refreshing mix-up from every other course so far, because for the first and only time this challenge, I get to actually drive backward for my first item instead of being forced to enrage Cloud Turtle by turning around. This allows me to bank a 2nd mushroom before any opponent has even grabbed their first. I do need to wait for one to expire before grabbing boxes at the anti-grav jump, so I have enough juice to reach the next set, but as long as I can preserve velocity and don't miss any item opportunities, this course is a relative breeze. The same cannot be said for Cheep Cheep Beach, windy as its ocean air may be. This is far and away the most formidable course in the Cup, with a diverse array of exigent scenarios. Knowing when to coast and what boosts to take advantage of after a mushroom is depleted is absolutely vital. Boosts allow me to cut through the water past the elevated sandbar section, as long as I don't get crabbed. The winding dirt path before the finish line has a bunch of sharp turns, and bouncing off the fence can jolt me into unwanted directions. Every second lost here is precious, as a clean run means I won't have to turn around on the boardwalk later. My full shots at the Shell Cup started shakily. The first time I even bothered to complete every course, I got 9th. Ugh, I'm scraping the bottom of Donkey Kong's barrel here. And trust me, you don't want to get anywhere near that stuff. My next attempt started strong, and I made it to 2nd place in Moo Moo Meadows before turning too sharply, hitting a fence, and missing the item set altogether. By the time I was done correcting this mistake, I couldn't do any better than 6th. Mario Circuit was going okay until Daisy stole my double item box at the end, slashing my placement from a possible top 3 all the way down to 11th. Even though winning was impossible at this point, I decided to see it through for practice and was pleasantly surprised. 3rd place in Cheep Cheep Beach proved I had the necessary skill, and Toad's Turnpike was going smooth between good boosting and lucky glider opportunities until my mushroom ran out an instant too soon. But Lady Luck was on my side as another item box spawned right on top of me, letting me recover to a solid 1st place finish and get a lagging 4th overall. A flawless Moo Moo Meadows helped me in the right direction, making tight turns and boosting off ramps and molehills to handily reach 1st place halfway through the final lap. This allowed for a perfect start to Mario Circuit as I was lined up for the starting box, giving me an excellent lead that I immediately blew by falling off during the anti-grav section. Despite this, I finished lap 1 in 4th place, though my mushroom was stolen by Mario. I probably should have just been patient, but Bowser Jr.'s brain has not yet fully developed for the task of delayed gratification, so I forged ahead and soon found myself stranded on grass near the 2nd set of items. I dropped to 10th place before I could regain speed, but still managed to finish in only slightly humiliating 7th place. This left me in 3rd overall, better than any try up to this point, so it's definitely worth pushing forward. I spent the entire first lap of Cheep Cheep Beach playing catch-up, but I overtook Cat Peach for 10th place with good movement and a clean forest section. At this point, I was on a roll. The only mistakes I made in lap 2 were hitting a couple fences and a tree, but those are much less costly with my golden mushroom equipped. In the final section, I traded back and forth with Mario and Inkling, but eventually turned up on top. This tied me for 1st place overall, meaning that a terrific Toad's Turnpike is all I need to close out the Shell Cup. Ah, you smell that? The scent of sweet success, because now I'm halfway to my initial goal. Or possibly burning hair, because the Fire Flower Cup has just begun. At this point, Mario Circuit is nothing new. Small shortcuts are everywhere, over sideline grass and behind piranha pipes. Restocking items is relatively easy, and the first only requires 2 Lakitu resets. There are still plenty of places for something to go wrong, but with decent driving and masterful mushroom management, I'll probably be alright. It only took me 3 practice attempts before I got 1st place. Toad's Harbor, however, is nowhere near as forgiving as its turnpike. Even though there are some items trailing trolleys, they're not as plentiful as they were on the highway. With a minimum of 3 turnarounds to reach the first set of boxes, I also have a massive distance deficit to discharge. Driving on walls should be avoided at all costs, because the provided boosts only serve to strand me before the final launch. There are 2 shortcuts, but the first is on a narrow sliver of elevated road that's incredibly difficult to navigate with my imprecise boosting. Crossing the grass at the end is nice, but doesn't save much time, and sometimes a tram tramples my plans by getting in the way. It took me 10 tries here before I even managed to do any better than last place, but with perfect luck and perfect execution, maybe I can do well enough to make up the point difference in other tracks? Because even though all the ghosts live in Twisted Mansion, it still haunts my nightmares less than my avatar haunts yours. Also, less than the harbor does. 2 major shortcuts at the beginning and end of each lap provide a clear method of catching up to my opponents, and good driving in the underwater anti-grav section makes my gold mushroom run out right before the glider jump where I can replenish them. Shy Guy Falls, on the other hand, is actually somewhat twisted. My mushrooms often ran out before the 2nd set of items, forcing me to rely on randomized waterfall boost pads to make it to the top, and if I ever miss time an item grab, the run is basically dead. Plus, there are lots of places to fall off, but at least there's a fairly easy shortcut right at the end which can help me gain ground. Most of my attempts died due to poor performance on early courses. Even when I pulled out a first place finish in track 1, the superstars did not align for my continued success and I ended dead last in Toad Harbor. Even so, I figured it was worth forging ahead, as 2 more wins might be enough to grab the gold cup anyway. Twisted Mansion's straightforward strategies allowed me to climb up to 4th place on the leaderboard, only 2 points behind Roy? How is he in first? Okay, I'm taking this personally. Time to show my younger brother who's boss. Shy Guy Falls had a shaky start as I fell off the track almost immediately, but I quickly recovered and crawled into 5th place by the beginning of lap 2. But as I boosted toward the item boxes, tragedy struck when I accidentally zoomed right through the minuscule middle gap, removing my chance for mushroom replenishment. Unsure of how to proceed, I tried to make it to the boost ramp, but ran out too soon and quickly lost any chance of first place. Had I immediately rectified my mistake, I might have been able to recover, but that window closed fast. Twice now I've lost a promising run due to my bike's small hitbox, I guess? Nothing can be taken for granted, not even hitting a string of item boxes that take up 80% of the track. The following attempts got off to a good start, because nailing Mario Circuit's shortcuts made up for some of my rougher patches. By the time I reached the finish line, my spirit was high and my lead was unassailable. I took on Toad Harbor without bumping a fence, and a flawless restock at the first potential mushroom drought let me finish lap 1 in 8th place. As I passed and grabbed the double box slightly too early at the next set of items, I took a moment to slow down, reverse, and guarantee full power. Gotta learn from my mistakes if I want any shot at this. The short delay paid off as a tram with trailing items pulled in front of me, and once again I was up 4 spots heading into the final lap. Repeating my safety strats dropped me from 2nd to 4th, but soon regained my lead, neck and neck with my petrified father. Despite consisting entirely of bones and lava, Dry Bowser did have the good sense to cut across the grass at the end of the course, narrowly edging me out for first place. But I still had a solid 3-point lead to work with and was closer than ever to that golden Fireflower Cup. Twisted Mansion, as usual, was a scarily smooth ride, and the only potentially disastrous scenario came as I drove the 3rd lap a bit too well and nearly grabbed the double box with my mushroom still active, though I probably would have been fine if this had occurred. Now I'm 9 points ahead, and the only thing that can maybe stop me is another disastrous mistake on Shy Guy Falls. It was all going smoothly until lap 3 when I ran out of boosts on the waterfall. This led to a terrifying moment where I thought I was stranded to the water's whims, but before I came to a complete stop, I hopped, and that was just enough to counter the current and grab the double mushroom to close out the lap in 1st place, absolutely crushing DK and Yoshi in 2nd with 16 points. Now all that remains is the Banana Cup, a slippery slope of surging stress. Each course gets progressively harder and more finicky, a fitting end to the video, although make sure to let me know if you want this challenge on the much more difficult later cups. Based on the courses so far, I shudder to think of the psychological consequences of racing on Rainbow Road. But Banana isn't quite as bad as all that. It only took almost half the time I spent on this whole challenge. The cup starts out empty with dry desert, a fairly straightforward track with very few opportunities for major mistakes. After reaching my first item, the golden mushroom can be used to easily cut across the deep sand and nab the double box just in time as the power-up runs out. Although it is possible to play this section too well. If my original mushroom is still active, I won't be able to pick up 2. Not a death sentence, but the next set of boxes is an uncomfortable distance. From there, I use 2 mushrooms to make it through the water, past the finish line, and grab another box to start the cycle over. But starting with the most consistent track is actually a curse, because every subsequent race has the potential to screw things up further. There's nowhere to fall off in Donut Plains 3, but the incredibly sharp turns and distance between the last and first sets of items makes this a dangerous course. There are occasional shortcuts, but I mostly had to make sure that I cut across grass wherever possible, which is made extra dangerous by small hills that can bounce me far off course if I'm not careful. Still, by drift hopping, being patient with boosts, and tricking off Monty molehills when available, I was able to come in first most of the time, although it's usually a tense last few seconds to overtake the final opponent. Unfortunately, even with a perfect 30-point setup, I fumbled again and again on Royal Raceway. The items are at only 3 extremely awkward locations around the track, and the sharp turns make it difficult to maintain momentum. Even though there are 3 places to restock, the builders had that royal money and made the track way too long long, so item management becomes a crucial issue. Finding a consistent strategy for that accounted for the majority of my time here, and reaching the glider section with a full mushroom in the bank is absolutely crucial. This guarantees me enough distance to restock afterwards, but I want to spend as little time possible waiting for my gold mushrooms to run out so I can get back to full. But I wish that was the worst of it, because Donkey Kong's track is an absolute jungle of precarious turns, tricky shortcuts, and item placements nastier than an unwashed ape. Seriously, dude, take a shower from time to time. I know you don't have indoor plumbing, but there are waterfalls all around. Just, I don't know, figure it out. Like with Royal Raceway's gliding, I require a full mushroom going into the anti-gravity section, which means I need to reach the boost jump as my first runs out. Unless I stop, recharge, and lose time right beforehand, this is especially difficult as boosting into the S-turn will launch me off a hill, crashing into the opposite wall, and losing my orientation and momentum. It's possible to hit the glider ramp, but so inconsistent that I can't rely on it as a strategy. There's a shortcut at the end that I can take to gain a few seconds, actually need to take, but without an impeccable drift hop angle, I'll slide right over the edge. If I only have one mushroom, there's no way I'll make it to the next set of items when that happens, so long story short, I'm going to need all the blessings of the Holy Banana Temple to make it through this one unscathed. While plenty of attempts ended on the first two courses, my performance on them was consistent enough that it doesn't warrant significant discussion. But the sheer number of times I made it to Royal Raceway only for a tiny mistake or NPC interaction to ruin everything is absolutely absurd. All this can happen in DK Jungle too. Getting stranded or stolen from is bad enough, but banana forbid I miss the items in the temple. The glider section makes it impossible to reverse and correct my mistake, dooming everything. A critical error here is the most heartbreaking thing possible in this challenge, and it happened 5 times. But after a solid performance in Royal Raceway landed me in 5th place, I was raring to steal King Boo's crown for the top spot. I steeled myself for a wild ride through DK Jungle, which started well as I was able to trick through the boost jump section without using my gold mushroom and nailed the log shortcut at the end of lap 1. I had to reverse for a second item, which dropped me from 5th down to 8th, but I was in the middle of the pack and feeling good about my chances. All I really needed was a placement higher than King Boo, and as I entered the anti-grav section, I had him in my sights. But when I rounded the corner, I hadn't turned enough and found myself propelled into the void. I mashed the left trigger, praying desperately to the almighty banana that my mushroom wouldn't run out too soon. I had just enough time to boost once and grab a double box, so even though I fell off the shortcut, I had enough juice to fuel up once again. I cut the corner so close that I had to jump over the pit, and that was exactly what I needed to steal the top spots from King Boo and Yoshi. Everyone's favorite sacrificial dinosaur immediately took it back by gliding over my head, but I slowed down, lined myself up, and shot straight through the shortcut to secure 2nd place, proving that, yeah, it is surprisingly possible to get 1st place in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's first 4 cups without ever accelerating. By 1 point, anyway. Playing the game in such a unique, high-speed way is actually super fun and interesting, and hey, there are still 20 whole cups left to conquer without that useless gas pedal, so absolutely let me know in the comments if you want to see this challenge continued in a future video. For now, let's close out on a high note. And remember, I'm streaming now. To hang out with me and other cool people like yourself, along with getting more frequent channel updates, make sure to join my Discord community. Until next time, drive safe, make haste, and get 1st place. Wait, what is that blue thing?